Hi, my name is Clay Tumey, and I am an ambassador for the Enneagram Prison Project. As we approach our 10th anniversary, we thought it'd be fun to sit down and have a chat with all the people who've had a major impact along the way with EPP. In today's episode, I chat with two people who take the Enneagram into prison and share it with those who are on the inside and looking for a way out. We call them EPP Guides, and without them, the project simply does not exist. What's happening? I like to wait until they take a drink to ask my first question. And then,
you're such a kind man.
Yeah. You've listened to the podcast before, yeah?
Yeah, I listen to it the minute it comes out. I love your podcast.
So you know that we're like starting. We've already started. Because there's no formal introduction is not my thing. So we just start talking, and who knows? Like even Robin might decide, no, this is not actually the best place, and then he'll decide where the best place is.
We're gonna cut that shit out.
It's probably, yeah. And I love it. It's my favorite thing about doing it is that I don't have to really like worry about making any decisions. I can just talk and do the easy part, and then like hand it off to people who are more like more aware of what's good or bad or better or worse or whatever. But
it is pretty incredible how supportive EPP is as an organization. Like how many hands and brains and hearts it takes to be able to get done what the organization does. It's amazing. I
agree. And I've gotten the benefit of that more than a few times in my life. So I 100% agree. Before we go too far, introduce yourself, say who you are, whatever you feel like sharing with us, as little or as much, just so people will know who we're talking to.
Okay. My name is Dana, and I'd love to leave it there, but I also get that we're talking about guides, and I'm a guide with Enneagram Prison Project.
What exactly does a guide do?
A guide has the great pleasure of being able to, well, actually now it's not just going on the inside. We get to do it on the outside too. But when I first started with the project, all of our work was only on the inside, and we get to go inside and explore the Enneagram with people. It's pretty awesome.
How long have you been a guide?
I saw something on my LinkedIn the other day, and I've officially been working with EPP for 4.5 years. I was around the project for 2 years before that, but I've been a guide for 4.5 years.
Do you have like an actual anniversary? Like when it hits 5 years, will you know like today is the day, or is it just like a general time period?
No, it's a general time period. I have to have LinkedIn to tell me. But the anniversary that I do in my head is every August, I am reminded that I will have known Vic and Alex for a year longer, because that's where I met them. And that's why I'm a part of EPP.
Did you meet them when you were inside teaching?
No, I met them at Vallombrosa when I was getting certified through the Narrative Enneagram. And then I met them there, and I was like, oh, you know me. I wanted nothing to do with anyone. I made it very clear I wasn't there to make friends. And then Vic and Alex, I was like, oh, these guys are cool as hell. Like, I kind of want to hang out with them. And quickly fell in love, as everyone does. And it was kind of like, I knew I wanted to be a part of the project in whatever way I could, even if it was doing paperwork and filing for Rick and Susan, just to be around the energy.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, you're asking for more paperwork, for more filing to do, for more clerical work.
Thank God it turned out I'm not as good at clerical work as I am at other things that the project needs me for.
So and there's like so many places to start here. Like we could go to, why were you at Vallombrosa? Why did you care about the Enneagram? You still haven't shared what type you relate to the most. And not that you'll ever have to, but I'm just saying like there's a lot of starting points that we could go with. But the thing that pops first in my head, why are we calling them a guide instead of a teacher? Because to me, like I grew up with the idea that teachers teach, and I go to school and I have teachers, and I don't know something, and now a teacher teaches me, and now I do know something. So why with the Enneagram Prison Project why am I calling you an EPP guide instead of an EPP teacher?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I'm sure that there's actually some kind of party line that we use for this. But for me, my understanding of it really is that I can kind of go in and teach anything, but it doesn't mean that I've done the work to be able to walk hand in hand with you, side by side with you, to actually be able to help guide you as you navigate the territory. And so one of the beautiful things about EPP is we aren't just going in and kind of teaching the Enneagram, which, by the way, has its place. I'm a big fan of, I'm a 6 with a 5 wing, so I love it when people are willing to teach at me. But that's not really the best way to be able to learn how to do our inner work, especially in prison is not like the safest place to be able to navigate this territory of doing our inner work. And so it's a lot easier to have a facilitator who's like, I'm in this with you. Like, this is not easy. This shit's hard. And I am right next to you in this step by step. And that's really what our guides are there. That's what we're all doing on the inside. We're not just teaching about what the Enneagram is. We're embodying the work that we've done and the work that we're asking our students or inviting our students to do.
A couple months ago, I think it was in June now, so maybe 3 months ago, I talked with 5 ambassadors who had gone through the program on the inside, and then they've since gotten out, and we talked through like the first days out, what it's like to be newly released and all that stuff. And I think it'd be silly if I didn't ask, what was it like as a guide to go in for the first time? Like, what were your experiences? I kind of just want to know everything about the first time you step foot inside of a correctional institution, which I'll say as I roll my eyes, because hilarious that they don't correct a whole lot, but it's what they call themselves. Had you ever been to a jail or prison before that? Was EPP your first experience going in? And if so, just like, what was that all like?
EPP was my first real experience. When I was younger, I had friends that were kind of in and out. And so sometimes I would go and visit or bring people to go visit. But this was my first time like really going in and being able to stay. And I feel so lucky to be able to say this. I had a very kind of unique training with Enneagram Prison Project. I was fresh out of my Enneagram classes. So basically I didn't know shit. And I went in, and the way that they had it set up was, okay, Susan is going to teach in the morning and for 3 hours, and you're going to watch Susan teach. And then in the afternoon, you're going to replicate Susan's teaching, which, look, she's, thank you. Like, you cannot replicate Susan, like, and not just the teaching and the guiding that she does, but like the energy, the depth and breadth of knowledge. I mean, she's just incredible. And so I was like, this is hard. And I was so committed to it. But I think the reason why I could be so committed in the face of like, I can't do this and I don't know what I'm doing and blah, 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 which is so much my type story. And it's no longer the same as it was then, but was because I absolutely fell in love with the guys. We were doing a class in the morning with RCP, which is a program at Elmwood Correctional that basically is, if you're really well behaved, you go in and you do this regimented program and your program from morning to night. And Vic talks about it in his thing. And Neelam was there at the time running the show. And then in the afternoon, we had an AB 109 group, which were guys that were serving prison terms in the county jail, which, if you know anything about it, is like the last thing that people want to do is serve a prison term in county jail because extra time constantly gets added on. And I was just like, these are my people. This is it. Like, I've found my people. They're all in jail and prison. And it was so enlivening. And I think for the first time in my life felt really, really passionate about something. And so I got to spend, it was an 8-week class at the time. I don't think we were 12-week classes, all day long with Susan, watching Susan. I was in there with Rick and some other people. And it was really, really incredible. So, and it was an easy entry point. And then my first time into San Quentin was obviously very different because it's a prison and there's like a lot of history around it in the state of California. And I got to go in to be on a type 6 panel for Susan. And that's where I met Aaron West, one of our other guides who I absolutely adore. And I was like, okay, this is it. Stakes are higher. It's men in blue, lifers. And again, I was like, yeah, still my people. Okay, I'm in the right place.
What the hell is AB 109? I've heard, I'm in Texas, you're in California. I've heard people throw that out there before. I've heard Vic talk about it. I've heard, I think I've heard Dustin talk about it maybe, but people just throw these terms out like that. Actually, we use a lot of code in this world. Yeah. Like AB 109 is one that gets thrown around a lot. Like you're just saying Men in Blue, like that's something different. Like it's a movie about alien. Actually, that's Men in Black. Never mind. But like we use a lot of phrases that the average listener might not always know about. So, and we can talk about any of them, but what is AB 109 and why do guys serving time under that get more time? Why do they get time added on, or whatever the phrase was that you said?
Sorry, I wasn't clear. AB 109 is a thing where it's like if you have a certain crime, you're actually allowed to serve your time in a county jail instead of a prison. The only reason extra time gets added is because county jail, they're sticklers for everything. Like, you have a paper clip, we're going to add time on. Like, I mean, you have a staple. That's not an exaggeration, by the way.
That is exactly how it is. You have a paper clip, and that is contraband, and you are getting a case now.
Yeah. So that's why it's a kind of a point of contention. They're like, just send me to prison where no one cares if I have a ballpoint pen or a paper clip or a staple, and that the only way time is going to get added on is if I actually really do some shit.
I interrupted to ask about AB 109 and I forgot where we were, but probably talking about your first experience in prison and your panel experience in San Quentin and all that good stuff. At what point did you know? Well, back to Vallombrosa. Like you're saying that you're avoiding people. You're not trying to make friends and all this stuff. And that's where you met Alex and Vic. Why were you doing Enneagram work if it didn't involve being interactive with other people? Like what was your entry point to the Enneagram itself?
I was introduced to the Enneagram in graduate school. One of my classmates was actually getting certified through the narrative. And I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. And then I read books on it and I wasn't sure if I was a 5 or a 6. And I kind of always was going back and forth between those two. And I had worked for a couple of nonprofits, and I was working for a company at the time that helped mostly kids, but kind of anyone, for the most part, like read better if they were struggling with reading. And I was like, okay, I can't do this for the rest of my life. Like, this is very cool work, but like, I just can't do this for the rest of my life. And very, at the time it felt random, but I get now that all the ways that like the universe supports and that when I'm not being totally dense, I can listen and trust and take a leap of faith. And I was like, I'm going to go get trained in the Enneagram and become an Enneagram teacher. What the fuck I thought I was going to do with that? I have no idea. And at the time, I really did hate people, couldn't tolerate people. My social awkwardness and anxiety was so bad. Like, there's no way that I could have launched myself and tried to work with people. And I actually had no desire to do it. And then I think when I met Vic and Alex there, I was like, oh, like, this is why I'm here. And then again, I met Rick and I got to do a class with him, and Susan had dropped in. And so I was like, this is why I'm here. Like, this is why I came. This was divine timing. It was pretty incredible because I think there's probably a lot of divine timing things that I've missed by not taking the leap of faith that I'm being invited into.
So what was it like the process to even become a guide, 4.5 years ago or whenever? It's different than it is now, right?
Yeah.
What was it like back then?
It was long and hard. So very quickly, I realized as I'm doing this training with Susan that I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. And at the lunch break every day, like very nicely, she would be like, hey, great work. And by the way, I don't know if this is the way that it was for her, but this is the way that I heard it. And granted, I was very in my type structure at the time, but it was like every lunch break I heard like what I felt was like this really immense disappointment and like, just need you to know you're probably not getting hired. Like, hope you can hack it. And like, you're probably not getting hired. Now, I don't know that that's actually
that was from
true.
Susan?
Right. So like so much projection on my side, also like deep kindness, but like, I just felt like she was like, don't get your expectations up, right? Like, you're not there yet. And I really wasn't. So I left. I stayed involved with the project in other ways. I did the whole training, stayed involved with the project in other ways, came back 18 months later after I had certified through the narrative. I got dual certified in their professional track and their teacher's track. And then I was like, oh, okay, I I kind of know what I'm talking about now. Like there's more confidence here. And like maybe a couple days before I was fully certified, she had invited me into San Quentin. And after the panel, she was like, hey, we need guides. And I was like, me? She's like, cool. Can you start in 2 weeks? And I was like, yeah, I will rearrange my whole life for this. And I did. So yeah, it was. And then the next two, they were not called GTPs at the time. They were called the Teachers Training Program, because at that time we didn't have this whole kind of guideship thing down. And I took both of those with Susan and Gail Scott, and I learned a ton. So I am like the person who has taken GTP probably more than anyone else, except for maybe Sue.
Were you, so when you became a guide, were there other guides that were kind of already like doing it, or were you one of the first?
There were other guides doing it. One kind of, as I came in, phased out, and then another one was getting ready to retire. So she was teaching some classes and then she phased out. So then it was like Susan and I both teaching like 8 classes a week. And then we got the crew with Suzanne and Phil from Minnesota, Donna and Tam from Australia, Camilla and Heather Neely, Karen Jackie, and a bunch of them came in the next ones. Lance did the training. And so maybe Susan and I doing it, just the two of us, for 6 months or a year. And then kind of people arrived. So
for somebody who's never been in, either as an inmate or even as a visitor, and they might know a little bit about the Enneagram or what EPP does and all that good stuff, but maybe they don't know the nuts and bolts of actually going in and teaching or guiding inmates. You know more about that than probably anybody. I mean, obviously Susan as well, but there aren't many people in the world who know what we do better than you. Is that a fair thing to say? Just throw all humility out the window. You know what the hell I'm asking you, and the answer is yes or no. Is that, I mean, you're the most qualified for me to ask. Can you explain what the hell you're doing when you go inside? Why is it used to be 8 weeks, now it's 12 weeks or whatever? Like, what exactly are you doing in an EPP class?
Yeah, happy to explain that for sure. So you are
the most qualified, by the way. I know you slid out from answering that damn question.
I am. I'm fairly qualified. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Well,
so that's all you're getting out of me
for now. just so we're clear on that. For now. Sorry. Go ahead. How you were saying in all of your humility. What exactly?
So I think the very clear thing that we're walking in with curriculum wise is we're walking in with the Enneagram. We're walking in with information on ACEs, so adverse childhood experiences. We're talking about trauma. We're talking about the ramifications of toxic stress, which is the result of ACEs, which is, prolonged stress in our bodies. We're talking about addiction because especially in the United States and in California, a massive percentage of our students are in there because of addiction. Or something that is drug or alcohol related. Maybe I'm selling drugs. Maybe I've got a DUI, like whatever that may be. And I think the other thing that we're doing is we're loving them. We're offering unconditional positive regard. We're offering holding. We're offering love. And we're offering, and I think I do it in a slightly different way than other people because I can be very hard. We're also offering the truth. So like, I love you and you're doing things that are absolutely fucking destroying your life. You don't have to keep doing that. You have choice. And now let's look at the choices. Let's look at the patterning. I mean, I think I know for me and then for my students pretty consistently, it is so illuminating to read on a piece of paper once we finally find our territory, like our habituated ways of thinking and feeling and doing, and just to feel so like called out by that and like, fuck, that is true. And like how good it feels to know that we're not alone and that there's a way out and that we actually come in with these essential qualities, these inherent gifts, these awesome strengths that maybe we weren't aware of and that maybe no one saw or recognized or reflected back in us. So we're doing a lot of loving, a lot of holding, a lot of hard truth telling, and then the basics of the Enneagram, addiction, and trauma.
You mentioned the ACEs. That is the adverse childhood experience. What's the S?
Just that you might have more than one.
Oh, yeah.
Adverse childhood experiences.
Okay, gotcha. So, and that's like a super not fun thing to deal with and to fill out and to talk about and to think about, but it's absolutely necessary, especially with this population. What is that, and why is it so important to do that, like, up front? Because it's one of the first things that's done in a class, right? But it's also one of the most painful, though. So how do you take the most painful part, or what could be a very painful part, and make that step one?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I mean, for me, what makes it kind of the easy, this is maybe twisted, what makes it the easy place to go is, like, I get that suffering is part of the human condition, and I want to talk about that. I want to call it to light. I want us to all know that we've suffered, we will continue to suffer, and also to really I think normalize that a lot of us have had ACEs and that they're really unavoidable. And especially when we look at all of the broad things, like when you look at an ACE assessment, it's not just those things that are ACEs. Those are just the 10 most common that came out of the initial study. So, but ACEs are like all of the hard shit that happened to us in childhood that then ramps up all of our stress hormones and then has our bodies running in fight or flight. Fight, flight, freeze. So what happens then is our brain circuitry isn't developing the way we want it to, or we aren't the way we want it to. That's not good phrasing. Our brain circuitry isn't developing in a way that is going to support us. We're going to have a hard time self-regulating, which makes sense, right? If I can't self-regulate, I'm going to do drugs. I'm going to drink. I'm going to go out and do reckless shit. I'm going to do the things that are going to make me feel better or allow me to not have to feel anything. So it is like the hardest place to first go, because it's like, okay, let's go back to childhood trauma, the thing that most of us have been trying to avoid our whole fucking life. But in going there and really learning how to unpack these things, we're doing maybe even just this small or massive opening for healing. And because we carry all of that stuff around with us. And when we can do that opening for healing, we understand that we don't have to stay in the same patterning. We don't have to keep doing the thing that we were doing to not have to feel that anymore, because we can really start to process it. We can start to hold ourselves in a different way. We can start to hold the people that maybe did that thing to us in a certain way. I know as I started doing all of this, I adore my dad, and there was so much friction in my childhood with my father, and I had a very hard time handling the kind of energy that was coming at me all the time. And as I started unpacking all this stuff, my relationship with my dad completely changed. Like, I let him be human, I got to be human, and we just got to show up and kind of take what the other person was offering. There was a lot of healing that happened after really teaching the stuff around the ACEs and then saying, like, I have to do the work that I'm asking my students to do.
What do you do if you get pushback? So if I'm in your class and you want to start here, and I just don't, I'm not here for all the pain. I'm not here for the trauma to come back up in conversation. I'm here to learn what a type 5 is. I'm here to learn what a type 3 is. I'm here to learn what a type 9 is. Like, what do you do as a guide when you get somebody like me in your class who does that? And by the way, I say like me, because I totally would have done this, by the way. And when I learned the Enneagram, this was not part of it. This isn't this. It was years before this was part of the process. So I don't know that I would have been as open to just jumping straight to childhood trauma. And I would have very likely, at the very least, I think I probably would have just pretended that I didn't have much and just give me straight to the book learning. Mm-hmm. And so what do you do? Surely you experienced that with some of the guys in the classes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I invite it, right? I'm a 6. I love skepticism. Like, have it all. There's enough space for everything. And I have done group process work and trained in it for over a decade. And there always has to be at least one person holding something, someone holds the tears. If everyone can't hold their own tears, someone holds the anger. If everyone can't hold their own anger, someone has to hold the resistance if other people can't kind of balance out and hold their own resistance. So I welcome it. That's okay. There's enough space for all of it. All I ask is that you just sit and you stay in class as much as you can tolerate, and you listen. And if you don't want to engage and you don't want to take the ACE assessment, the survey, you don't have to. It's fine.
I think the stereotype for people in prison is that it's a bunch of, especially with men, is that it's just a bunch of aggression, and there's very rarely like passive sit back and deal with it. And so surely I think I've been locked up, so I have a little clearer understanding of what the typical inmate is like, but it's still like for just your run of the mill human in American society who doesn't know what it's like to be on the inside. They hear that and they probably think like, okay, but you're getting some assholes in here who are like disruptive. And it's like, what do you do with that? I mean, what do you do with someone who just says like, this is bullshit, or this is not where you should start, or whatever, or I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong. Is that not something that you experience much? Is it dudes are pretty tame, or how does that look from your perspective?
I mean, I would say in general, I think if someone doesn't want to do it, they're like, I'm out. And usually that happens in week one, because I make it very clear in week one, by the way, this is where we're going. If this isn't what you want, then this is not the class for you, or this isn't the time for you to take the class. And that's okay. No judgment. My feelings won't be hurt. It's fine. The other thing is often, not always, like I love going into places where we've never programmed, like either the facility or the pod or whatever. But so often there will be someone who has taken one of our classes. And if another person in the classroom gives pushback, they often will say, look, I know it, look, I get it. It sounds shitty, but like, give it a try. Like it definitely works. So if I don't have that in the classroom where one student is like, I don't even need to jump in because another student is already handling it, then I'm pretty good at like lovingly pushing back on people and being like, well, why don't you want to go there? Like, I'm okay with it, but like, let's explore that. Why don't you want to go there? What's so uncomfortable? What feels unsafe about it? Like, what's scary? Like, let's go to the hard place. So I don't know. I think that in our classes, people are pretty stoked to be there. I mean, once people are in jail or prison, and of course, everyone really, not everyone, but in most of our facilities, people are self-selecting. So they'd be somewhat interested in what they thought we were offering. But I find that on the inside, for the most part, our students are so acutely aware that they're suffering and they want a way out that there is, to one extent or another, there is a hungering and a thirst for like, I do want to change because the way that I've been living has not been working. I haven't really been living. I absolutely have not been thriving. I don't want this anymore. And when people are okay with it, they're not at that place in their suffering yet, then they drop off. They don't stay in. Very rarely have I ever had students that are like super disrespectful. That almost never happens. I've definitely had students where like, I have had reactivity in response to their reactivity, and it wasn't great. Hasn't happened in years, but it has happened. And I've looked back and been like, oh, I really wish I could have dealt with that better. I wish I had, right? And
well, I'm about to ask you about that. And what was that? And what were those situations?
I had a situation and I wasn't alone, right? So like I couldn't do damage control on my own. Like I had other facilitators in the classroom with me. Susan was one. I don't want to give too much additional information away because, but I don't want to give, any additional details. But what I will say is I had someone on a panel who wasn't the type that we were paneling. And which is fine. Like that happens a lot, right? And then sometimes we let them stay. Sometimes they'll get off. Like there's a lot of freedom in that.
What you're saying is they were mistyped. It was a type, X panel, and they were a type Y who thought they were a type X.
Yes, thank you for clarifying that. And consistently, what this person was doing was taking a shit on the people that were type X. And type X was a reactive type. And type X was not happy. And I was getting triggered as I was facilitating. And I can own that this is all of me and not on the other person. I was wanting to protect my panelists. I was wanting to protect the class. And I also was like, this person needs to like, they need to get off the panel. And I asked them to get off the panel in a very unkind way. I essentially kicked them off the panel and was like, you need to fucking go. And it was not my best moment, right? Like if I could have really gotten grounded and centered, I could have said, wow, like I really see you instigating. And isn't it interesting that you're saying you're this type and yet everything this type is saying that they're doing, you're taking a shit on right now. Like, you know, can you see that these things aren't aligning and maybe you're not this type, and can you see how that's really hurtful for the people of this type, because we all have our strategies and our ways of being, and we're very identified for the most part with those things. But I just like lost it and just booted the person off the panel, and I was like, fuck, that's not my best moment, and my boss is here, and like, you know, when you disappoint Susan, it's like the worst thing on earth, because she's so kind and she's so loving and she wants to have a conversation and really do the work with you. And I'm like, look, from my childhood, like, can you just yell at me and tell me I'm a horrible person and not actually make me stay and have this really loving and tenderhearted conversation? So it was not my best moment. And I can't say that I've had tons of those, but I've definitely had them. And I'm like, oh, that's not happening again.
How long was it before there was a conversation with you directly to suggest maybe this is a strategy to try out next time? Like with whoever else was there and saw that, did they just kind of leave you alone or let you figure it out? Or was there real time like intervention by anybody else to say like what you did was not okay or whatever? By the way, I just want to just show appreciation for the fact that we're talking about something that's probably not a very fun memory and you're willingly sharing with us. So thank you, by the way. I'm curious what it looked like from that point forward once you essentially kicked them off the panel.
Yeah. So I either that night or the next day, Susan was like, are you ready to talk? Yeah.
God, that's the worst question ever. Don't ever ask me that.
I think she said it in a different way, but like she like knew that I knew that we needed to process, and I like literally when I say need, like I needed it. Like I was like, I don't know what happened. Like I can usually keep my cool. Yeah. I'm usually energized by when people get reactive, and just I completely lost myself in that moment. And I was able to have a repair. It was an intensive, so I was able to have a repair with the student the next day. Like, I mean, it went like, here's what I will say. For the most part, when I have done things that I'm like, fuck, I could have handled that better. As long as I have gone back for the repair, the relationship with the student has always been better for it. Like there's more trust. They're like, you're human and you apologize. And like, you're not trying to pretend like you're perfect. I mean, I think I literally can't think of a time when I went for a repair with a student and it didn't go well. And not like because of me, but because my students are gracious and forgiving and kind. And I can also come with like humility. Like I did not deal with that well. And I want to apologize and I want to be emotionally responsible. And this is my piece and blah, blah, blah. So I'm not like justifying any of those things, but I think the thing that always amazes me is when I walk away from something and I'm like, oh my God, I fucked that up so bad, I'm going to get fired. Which, by the way, happened every single class. My first 2 or 3 years of teaching, I would walk out of the classroom bent over, so anxious I could barely get to the car and I could barely breathe. And I was like, I'm going to get fired. I did something wrong and it's going to get back to Susan and Rick and I am going to fucking get fired. It's a little better now. I actually have to do something pretty bad to think I'm going to get fired, which is relative, right? But I will say that there's something magical about going for a repair with people.
I want to make jokes because I know your type, and you've already said that you're a type 6. But how much of that is that normal for type 6?
So I can't speak for all 6s, but I can speak for myself and I can speak for Aaron because we have had many of these conversations. I mean, but also Aaron and I are like the same person. We're both 6, 5-wing, social dominant. So there's like a lot of alignment there, but I think it's like pretty common with 6s. Like that's the angst, right? It's my vice, like literally gripping me by the heart. Like what does Russ say about the type 6? It's like the quaking heart, right? And it's just like, oh my God, like this thing is going to kill me. Like, and not only, and it's not going to be an easy death. Like I'm going to get fired and I'm going to suffer and then I'm going to die. And like, I hurt all these people's feelings. It just is like this giant magnification of something trivial or something that didn't even happen, but like, you know, could have happened, which is so that worst case scenario. I mean, it's like all the pieces of my type structure would just contract so hard after the minute I got out of the classroom. And I honestly think it's because through grace, a lot of the time when I'm in the classroom, the really like fierce inner critic like committee that sixes have going on, like the door on that is locked when I'm teaching. It's almost never kicking in. And then it beats my ass the minute I get out of the classroom because it's like, look, you just had none of me for 3 hours. Now we're compounding that.
How long did it take when you first got into the Enneagram? And we're kind of leaving the conversation about guides like on the side for a second, but I'm just curious, like specifically for you, how long into your Enneagram experience early on did you realize, yeah, I'm definitely a type 6? And what in particular, not just talking about stuff like this that might be less pleasant, but even like the positive side of 6, like how did you know I'm totally type 6?
So this is why I love jail so much and how I knew that I was committed. So I was like 6'5", and then I'd run to the books and I'd be like, fuck, I don't know. And even at the training that I did, like there were people that pulled me aside and they were like, we actually think you're an 8 and we want to have an intervention. We actually think you're a 5 and we want to have an intervention, right? I'm a very like alive, loud 8, but then like I also will be sitting in the corner just like watching everyone and freaking them out because I'm like not talking and just intensely staring at them and watching. Which
is the 5.
So,
yeah.
Right. Right. And I was on a panel in Elmwood, that first round, and Susan was facilitating the panel, and there was only one type 6 in the room, and I was on the panel with him, and everything that came out of his mouth, I was like, I could have said that verbatim. And everything that I said, he's like, you just read my mind. And I was like, oh, this is it. Like solid, no questions asked. I am a type 6. And it's easy for me to talk about kind of, you know, all the ways in which my type gets in the way. But you're right. I mean, there's a lot of things that I love about being a 6. I was at a different Enneagram training, and I was working with 2 body types, and they were like, wow, you know, do you ever wish you were another type or another center of intelligence? And I was like, I was younger at the time. And I was like, it took me like 30 something years to be okay with this type. I absolutely don't wish I was another type. Like I'm finally starting to figure out how to navigate this territory. And like, I've got it handled. The areas where it feels out of control, like I can deal with. I can't imagine now trying to shift and navigate some other whole territory. So I really do love being a 6. I mean, it's fun to talk about how like neurotic and crazy I am, but I love it.
I'm just peeking at the clock, and I know I said like a certain range of time. Are you good on time, or do you have something to boogie? Okay, cool. Because I want to ask. I actually don't want to ask any specific question other than just like generally as a guide for EPP, or anytime these conversations come up with people asking you what you do or this or the other. What is it that you just love about being an EPP? I don't want to put words in your mouth. You haven't overtly said that you love being an EPP guide, but I think I know you well enough to know that it's something you're kind of cool with, at the very least. But what is it that you care so much about with all this work? Whether even if it's not specifically people on the inside, but just in general, the work that you do, the things that you care about. I don't know enough to ask the perfect question to get the perfect answer. So I kind of just want to know, like, why do you give a shit? Like, why do you care? Why are you here? Why are you doing this? Why all of that? So many whys.
Yeah. So this is like probably my type bias. Just like I look at our organization and I'm like, you know, everything is focused on our inherent goodness because like Susan's a 1, right? And like wanting to get back to that goodness that exists in every one of us. And for me, it's like, for years, I had dreams where I could hear my own voice and I was telling myself to wake up, like, and with such an urgency. And I really have a passion for to wake myself up and to help wake other people up. And I really think that that's a collective job. And part of our organization, that's what our organization is doing. We're helping people to wake up to, and then like insert whatever it is, our inherent goodness, the way our personality gets in the way, what our soul is calling for us to do, the next step in our healing. I mean, I just love being with people that want to wake up, that want to have real conversations, people that are passionate about healing, people that are passionate about being real. Like, I cannot tolerate, and probably to an unhealthy degree, anything that I feel like is remotely superficial. I just can't tolerate it. It drives me crazy, and I want to crawl out of my skin. And the other thing that I love about really the Enneagram, but EPP very specifically, is community. We have an awesome community. It's incredible. And it's just really, really nourishing and really supportive. And I'm so proud to be a part of it.
So the whole point of the podcast, when we first decided to do this, and actually it was, we've talked about it for years, and then finally this year it was kind of like spurred a little bit and just kind of, I won't say forced, but it was very much more, we'll do whatever it takes to make it happen. And I love it. It's a lot of fun to do. The idea is to tell the story of EPP as we approach our 10th anniversary next April. So by then you'll have 5 years. That's more than half away. And if you're at 4.5 now, then you'll be at 5 years then. And so you've been here for half of the time that it existed, basically. So what's EPP today like compared to EPP of, half a decade ago when you came around? What are some things back then that maybe don't exist anymore, or things that didn't exist then that they're normal now and you can't imagine EPP without them? And it's totally wide open. Whatever comes to mind is what I'd like to hear about.
The first thing that comes to mind, and I know I've talked to you about this before and you always kind of set my head straight, is like that longing for when we actually all fit around Rick and Susan's giant kitchen table. Like, everyone in the organization fit around that table. And now I don't even know that everyone in the organization could fit in their house. And that is so cool. And there also is a part of me that's like, oh, I long for when I could literally just kind of, sit and hold hands with everyone at the table and we could all be in, one giant kind of hand-holding group circle. But I think the other thing is that the support that we were talking about earlier, that there are so many brilliant minds and hearts that are contributing to the project, and all of this amazing stuff is getting done. And we get to kind of just, each one of us, show up and do the things that we're really good at and the things that we really love. And then all these parts and pieces are fitting together to make this like amazing community, and also like amazing product. And I put product in quotes because I don't know another way to do it. But for our programs, 9 Prisons, 1 Key, Path to Freedom, GTP, including all the people that are taking them, that are giving us feedback, so then we can make better iterations of it beyond. So I think the thing that I miss the most is how small we were. And the thing that I love the most is how big we're becoming. Like that it's both sides of it, and holding the paradox of all of that so many people are drawn to, oh God, for lack of a better word, like our vibe, the energy of the Enneagram Prison Project, which is really like love and holding and unconditional positive regard and acceptance. And the whole, another conversation you and I have had recently, like, we do the work together. Like, I love you enough to have the hard conversation and to stay. And for me, that 6 with a 5 wing, all I want is safety. And that to me is one of the things that makes our community so safe, is that we love each other enough to stay, to have the hard conversation, or the how wonderful someone is too. But I care more about, are you going to stay and have the hard conversation with me? It's
a phrase that's been coming up lately, even aside from EPP, is just this idea of how we love each other and how people can love one another. And sometimes it's like, I actually even saw a t-shirt on an airplane yesterday that a girl was wearing that said most of these things. And what I've been thinking about is, like, sometimes love is like, hey, you want to hang out? Sometimes love is, I'm thinking about you, I care about you, I'm sad with you, if it's, condolences or whatever. And sometimes love is, hey, you want to hang out and have dinner and come over and watch. But then it's also, sometimes love is, hey, you're fucking up. Like what you're doing right now is detrimental not only to you, but the people around you that you care about. And just in case you don't know that, I'm telling you. And love is not always like this lovey-dovey, happy experience. I mean, it can be. It can ultimately lead to that. But sometimes sometimes love starts with pain. Or at least, or hell, just like the class. We start with aces. You just get right there and then go forward from that. So I love the idea that love is not just this flowers and sunshine thing that we draw hearts on, paper and hug each other and all that stuff. Like it's part of it, but it's not all of it. So it doesn't feel like it's been 45 minutes, but it's definitely been 45 minutes that we've been yapping here. So I love
yapping with you.
It's fun. It's one of my favorite things to do, and it's easy. It's what I'm skilled at. I can just yap forever. Any final parting shots or thoughts or anything that you would want to share with anybody who's either considering getting into this work, or even they already know a lot about the Enneagram and they're thinking about being a guide or anything like that? Any additional thoughts you want to share before we wrap it up?
Yeah, I would say the journey is hard, but it's worth it. No, but that's a total 6 thing. The journey is hard and it's worth it. There's absolutely an and. I have no idea who I would be without all the years of working with those who are incarcerated, and then really bringing deep into my life and into my heart the ambassadors. You, Sue, Vic, Clay, Renee, Dustin, Chuck. I mean, I know I'm leaving some out. Marty, Troy, Luke. I don't want to leave anyone out. Edmund. Who am I leaving out?
I'm not going to tell you. I'm not going to tell you.
Damn it. Whoever I left out, I'm sorry.
This is why Alex. I don't go down the name
Alex,
and names.
This is not. My point is that there is no way that I could be the person I am today without having my heart cracked open by the ambassadors. So even if someone is just like wanting to dip the toe in the community but doesn't want to spend time on the inside, absolutely come in, meet our ambassadors, and let your heart be opened. So I just one more quick thing. I was thinking of this the other day, and as we're talking about love, it popped into my head. So I kind of want to tell the story. But I remember, so Vic and Alex and I did the training together for, it's like something like 21 days at the Narrative. And very soon after that, he went to Denmark with you and Susan and Rick. And I remember he landed and he called me and we were talking really quickly. And then he ended the call and he's like, I love you. And I was like, what? And then I was like, wait, dude, I totally love this dude too. Like, he's a really good friend. And in that moment, like, everything shifted for me. And I really try now to express my love instead of hold it back. Like, I was like, that feels good. Like, that's safe. Like, open up, close back. But there's piece of how much we love each other in the organization. And also, again, to your point that sometimes love is hard. Absolutely. But it is real. And come in, you're invited.
So like we start at the very beginning of you just tell us, introduce your damn self. Tell us who you are and what you do with EPP and anything else that you think might be relevant to someone listening to the podcast.
All right. Introduce my damn self. Well, we'll start with that. So it's actually funny because I'm teaching again now in September, and we're bringing on board some apprentices who just finished our guide training program. And I've been having to introduce myself a number of times. And the reality is, Clay Tumey, is that you were part of my origin story. But I'll start with my name. So my name is Camilla Norman Field. I am a guide with Enneagram Prison Project and was part of the second, then called teacher training program, now called guide training program, joining up January 2018 and then starting to teach on the inside that April. So I've been teaching for a little over 3 years now, 3.5 years-ish. And I live in San Francisco, so I have had the privilege of teaching in San Quentin with Susan and Dana and Aaron. And that's the place where we get to have a lot of amazing visitors who become lifelong EPPers, and also teaching men and women in San Mateo and Santa Clara counties too, at Maple Street and Elmwood. So that's a bit about the EPP piece. But beyond that, I'm a mother. I got 2 awesome boys who are adolescent now and in their own process of forming an ego to hopefully shake it up when they're in their 20s and 30s and beyond. And a lovely husband with whom I am about to celebrate 20 years of marriage, which is mind and heart boggling. But good. You know, a lot of that work happens in those primary relationships, and we've certainly done our work and doing our work. And, but I was thinking about you, obviously, because I knew we were going to be speaking today. And, you know, you and I like to joke around, you know, I wouldn't be here if it weren't for you, which is the truth.
Well, it's a funny way to say the truth, but yeah.
No, it is. Like, I was like, you're like my radioactive spider, you know, you were the shock point. You were the one who rolled in. You and I were taking classes with the Riso Hudson Institute, part of their Enneagram Training Institute. And I think you and I just, you know, you roll into those places and you sort of glance around the room and kind of check out who's who and get a sense of like, I have a good feeling about this person. And also, to be fair, I've always had the experience too of like, oh, I don't know about this person. And, you know, that's the person I fall in love with the most by the end of the week. Cause you know, what do I know?
Yeah. Wait, so tell me that was that, which one of those was I don't know about this guy.
I was trying to, no. You were, actually, honestly, to be perfectly honest, I don't remember.
Yeah.
But I do remember that you rolled in with an EPP t-shirt. And prior to, well, let me pull back. So 11 years ago now for me, I guess, 2010. Yeah, 2010. I went back to school to become a coach. And that's when I first learned about the Enneagram, because we had to buy that blue book, that Wisdom of the Enneagram book. And we had to come into class first day and share our type. And that was just, it was a word I didn't know, I could hardly pronounce. But sure enough, you know, did some test taking, did some reading, started reading about the type 2 and was just floored. But with where was I going to go with that? With the New Ventures West. So before that, before doing the coaching school, I'd been working in drug policy reform. So the area of criminal injustice reform and drug policy reform was a big part of my life and experience. And I've had some close people in my life experience incarceration. And then you came in and I was just pulled you close and said, tell me more. And as you were telling me your story and telling me about EPP, it just deep inside, I thought, this is my future.
It's so funny to me. I was terrified to go into a lot of those classes as like an EPP ambassador, mostly because like at that point, it wasn't normal to have like prison people in those classes. Like nowadays, it's just like if a guy goes in or a gal goes into a class and you say, oh, I'm an EPP, like, oh, cool, we know about those guys. Like most of the time, that's the experience they have. And people love you before you even get there sometimes if they know you're coming. But I was like the first one to go into class without, it was just, nobody went before that. And it was like, all right, I'm going to just like boldly and proudly proclaim like who I am and where I'm from. But I was also kind of terrified because you don't really know like what people are going to feel, and they're all nice. So they're not going to like just outright be like, hey man, screw this guy. So, you know, a lot of it is like trying to figure out, do they really accept me? Do they think things that they're not saying or whatever? So I was kind of like, you know, like just scared of the whole thing. And as it turns out, it's actually quite a pleasant experience. And people really, especially nowadays down the road a little bit, where we've got a little bit of a reputation, I hope, in a good way, to where people just automatically accept you sometimes. And it was probably like that before, but I didn't know that. So,
well, I think you bring up something that's really interesting, actually, because, you know, prior to going back to school for coaching, I mean, I was not a person who rolled into the self-help section of a bookstore. Like if I was going to read, I wanted to read about, you know, Lord of the Rings or some fantasy, some fiction, something that had nothing to do with real life. Because, you know, if you're paying attention, real life is pretty intense as it is. And so I went to New Ventures West. What's this thing called meditation? What's this thing called the Enneagram? Learning all about this process of self-actualizing, developing presence, all this new terminology. And I live in San Francisco in California, and it was still new terrain for me. And when I started doing any of these classes, courses, retreats, I was struck by the lack of diversity. Pick an issue: gender, race, socioeconomic, geography to a certain degree. And while those courses were all meaningful and important and revelatory, it was missing a key ingredient. And I really appreciate and applaud EPP's approach, taking from Lynn Twist, the soul of money, and this consideration of what is sufficiency versus scarcity. Sometimes we hear about like abundance versus scarcity, but this idea of like what is enough, that really then pushed us to look at how we were offering our courses and what do we charge? Do we charge? We absolutely want to value our guides, faculty, staff, the amazing people who do this work, but how to do it in a way so that we really stand by this idea that the Enneagram, or just personal development in general, is for everyone.
Yeah.
And so I think, you being the first one in, and now this shift, and hopefully it's contagious, right, to other organizations, that there'll be some osmosis, but more and more seeing diversity. I mean, I think our 9 Prisons, 1 Key class starting in a matter of a couple of weeks has about 220 people signed up, something like that, and 25 countries represented. And that's just crazy. One measure.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
You mentioned something that is the business model of it all, if you want to call it that or whatever, how we charge, how much do we charge? This is one of my favorite things about how EPP does pricing and just in general, how we do business. So for the uninformed hearing all this for the first time, if I want to get involved in one of these classes, how much do I pay?
Well, Clay, let me tell you, the good news is that it's up to you. The reality is that when we say it's donation space, we mean that. And it's not just, fill out $50, $100, $250, $500, pick one of these buckets. It's really check with yourself, dig in deep, think about what your resources are, whether that's time or money or other ways to give back to organization, to EPP, to your community, and give of yourself in a way that reflects your sense of the work that you're doing, as well as the community that you're supporting. As a type 2, a big word for me is reciprocity, because when I'm not healthy, I'm giving, filling myself with resentment, not getting a whole lot back and calling it a good day. But when I'm really healthy, I experience reciprocity. There's no transactional giving. There's no giving to getting. It's just, we are all giving as we have capacity. We are receiving as there is need, and seeing that come to life in our business model of how we offer our programming, our virtual programming, to everyone in the world who's got an internet connection, and certainly even how we do business. That's not right, the word. How we bring our work to men and women and folks in custody as well. Certainly, we get grants from sometimes, local counties and governments, but also generosity of donors and corporations and foundations and all of that. But it works.
Yeah.
I mean, it works. We get paid our hourly rate. We have our budget, and then we open up and invite people to commune with us and connect with us, and through a sense of belonging, have a real feeling of shared responsibility that really translates into this system working. It's amazing.
In the post-COVID times, there's a lot of Zoom. Everything is virtual. Not everything, but practically everything is virtual. But you've been a guide since before all that was a thing. Like you've been around pre-COVID, and so you've actually been into the prisons and the jails, and you've done this stuff like face to face.
I have.
I'm kind of curious about your first days in. One of my favorite topics of discussion is talking with former inmates about their first days out. But as a guide, I'm curious about your first experience on the inside, even if it wasn't as a guide, even if just as a visitor or whatever. What are some things that you experienced going in
Yeah.
to the prisons for the first time, or jails even?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think at this point, if I had to count, I'd probably been a part of like some 20 different classes on the inside before COVID. So, and even now we're able to do Zoom with one institution that is newly enough constructed to have those bells and whistles, which is fantastic. First time in. So yeah, so back to like meeting you and seeing your t-shirt and figured all that out. I thought, this just makes sense. And this is just resonating deeply. But then I put it down because, as you know, that process of getting certified is no joke.
Yeah.
And, it's a type 5. I'm talking to a type 5, like the amount of essays, like, oh my Lord, that's why I didn't go to graduate school. Cause I was like, I never want to write an essay again. So I thought, okay, I'm not going to do my usual thing, which is like sign up immediately and spread myself too thin. I'm going to just chill. And when I'm done with the certification, then I'm going to figure out this EPP thing. But I got an email from James Flaherty, who was the founder of New Ventures West, the coaching school that I attended. And he emailed me and Susan and said, I don't know why, but somehow I just know that you two need to know each other. So there was the universe doing her thing.
Yeah.
And so I reached out to Susan. I said, hey, I've got a little bit of time here. She and I had this incredible 2-hour conversation where we covered every subject under the sun, and just the love affair began. And as it does with Susan, as is a common thread and theme of this podcast. But she invited me to San Quentin for the first time. So it was probably July 2017 that I first went in. And I mean, there's institutions, and then there's San Quentin, which is an interesting place because it's so, I mean, as I know it, it was being built by the prisoners who were living on a boat in the bay during the gold rush. So it's old, and newer institutions are built in rural areas to create economy and to bolster, boating. I mean, all sorts of nonsense. But San Quentin's interesting because it has it's in the middle of San Francisco, basically. It's in the Bay Area. It's nearby a lot of intellectual capital, and
it's literally on the water. It's right there on the water.
It is. It's prime real estate. I mean, it's just beautiful. Not that, those who are currently living there, residing there, get a real look at the view, but yeah. And it's like, so the point of kind of setting up that scene or talking about San Quentin is like, when you go in, it's like that really traditional, it almost looks like turrets, this old stone building, and you come in and it has that big metal bar door that clangs, right? So coming in, you're sort of walking down this big long parking lot, walking with the water there, and it's beautiful, and you're thinking like, how can this place that is just holding so much sorrow and sadness and trauma and pain be right next to this beautiful water and the sun and it's very odd. You check in, you do your thing, you go through clang, clang, holding up your ID. And I remember this feeling of sort of heart pounding because my direct experience with institutions was zero, other than, media and TV and all sorts of nonsense that portrays the humans there as not human. And then you walk through this sort of the Sally Port, and you come through, and it's again beautiful on like the main plaza because they've done this. They obviously have certain individuals there who do a great job with landscaping, but then you walk down the ramp into the yard, and again, like the yard, and being a woman and going down there, and it just, honestly, Clay, it felt to me safer than sometimes when I'm walking down Fillmore Street when it's dusk or dark. And obviously I was with Susan, who moved through that place with such ease and was given such deference and respect. And the minor interactions along the way. Hey, how you doing tonight? Hi, good to see you. Thanks for coming. And then to walk into the space, the Arc, and be a part of that class. And you don't go to watch the class.
Yeah.
You go to be in the class. And I don't know, for me, it was this balance between this is what I'm meant to be doing, as well as I wanted to sweep everybody in my bag and bring them all home with me and protect them, because it was just that sharp recognition, realization that nobody's here out of choice. Everybody is here out of pain, that they didn't get the help that they needed way back when.
It's a perspective that I wish more people had. I wish I had that before I went to prison, because I think our attitude towards incarceration, towards prison, towards how we deal with crime. I refuse to say corrections without laughing or rolling my eyes, because it's not a lot of corrections. But I think few people, you know, when I go and do like corporate speaking things like with banks or whatever, I always start with the slide of this is what a future criminal looks like. And I show a picture. Actually, I think you even remarked about this picture earlier, where I'm like 4 years old, little blonde headed kid in a sweater vest. And like, it's kind of like it's me. So maybe I'm biased, but it's like this adorable little child. Like, this is what a future criminal looks like. And the point being, like, nobody just grows up bad. Like, you can have bad circumstances. You can have bad things happen to you. But at the core of us all, I think we're good. And I don't think the intent is to just switch into being a bad person. So when you look at prisons, and it's real easy to see, oh, this guy, he's a murderer. He's a thief. He's a violent person. It's easy to do that. But I don't think it's reality. I don't think it's accurate either. And that's not just coming from, you know, like this compassion or sympathy or anything else that I have. I mean, there is that, but the reality is it's just not accurate to say, hey, this guy's a bad guy. Like, yeah, he did bad things and all that stuff, but at the core of us, we're good people who just got sideways at some point. And the reason that we got sideways is specific to us individually. And then you have this giant clump of people in prison who are all there together because they all got sideways in their own little world. And I don't think a lot of people immediately see it the way that you just explained it, or you know, as seeing people who are there as a result of pain or whatever. Yeah,
it's interesting. I mean, I am hearing that piece on sideways, and it's true. And I think it's important to underscore that the sideways piece is often happening to you when you're a child, when you have no agency, when you're not developed enough to understand much of anything. And the place typically children are where they don't get something, and something negative or bad or traumatic is happening is, what did I do wrong? What could I have done differently? Maybe I should be quieter, smarter, or faster, or better, or stronger, whatever it might be. But it's also, we have to mention the fact, and this is, my history in drug policy reform. The reason I got into that is one of my best friends from high school, African-American guy from Brooklyn, New York, got caught up in a drug charge that had him 14 years in federal prison. And he was one of the very few precious commutations issued by President George Bush, the younger. And so we ended up serving 8.5 of that. But, for our viewers who can't see me, I am blonde-haired, blue-eyed. I grew up outside of New York in Connecticut. And the war on drugs or drug policy was not something I had to consider at all in my experience. And then to see one of my closest friends, godfather to my older child, have to experience this racism, like this profound racism of our criminal and justice system, really opened up my eyes. And so also this piece of looking at mass incarceration as an extension of Jim Crow, which was an extension of slavery. You have to look at our history to understand that there are then also many people in there wrongly, on trumped up charges, who don't speak the language, who aren't the right color, don't come from the right zip code. I mean, even today I was reading about a man who is incarcerated, released, fought fires for, like, that's a big thing. And especially in the West, right? It's like we have incarcerated men, and I'm not sure about women, but I know for sure we have fire camp in some of our men's prisons, fought fires, who was being deported to Vietnam, a country where he has never set foot. It's like, there's this whole other piece too about who's in there. And, once you start paying attention, you realize that it's absolutely horrifying.
So when you're serving this population and all this, and this is just the way it is, so to speak, as some might say, but how much of that influence comes in when you're teaching? Are you allowed to, like, just outright say these opinions as a volunteer on the inside, or do you have to kind of keep all that in? What are the rules like as a teacher, or as a guide, as we call them with EPP? What's it like as a volunteer going in and having these having these thoughts? What's that like?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and it really depends. I mean, first and foremost, none of us are going to say or do anything that's going to jeopardize the program, right? So that's always at the forefront. And the background that I've given you around meeting you and experience with the Enneagram, and then also with my friend John Forte, who is incarcerated, and his experience, I do weave in parts of those and elements of those on day one when I'm introducing myself, because I'm also registering the fact that, and this is back to your question around first time in, coming into the classroom for the first time, or even walking across the yard, this sense of getting this sort of unasked question, but it's very much in the energetic field. Like, why are you here?
Mm-hmm.
You could be anywhere. Why are you choosing to come here? And scanning for bullshit, right? Scanning for, you're here to make yourself feel better. You're here as a looky-loo. You're here. So, I try to share my story authentically of why I'm here. And it's a bit of the Enneagram. It's a bit of my direct experience through my friend John, a bit of my experience with drug policy reform. Just the good fortune of having people along the way open up my eyes to what's true, right? What's the reality of our country, as wonderful as it is, the areas in which we have much room to improve. So I do share enough so that I can explain why I'm there and start to help build and create a container where everyone feels safe to do the work. And it's funny, Clay, each class is different. Sometimes it's day one. Maybe you've had some people in there who've taken the class before and they're creating the safe space. We have those sort of non-official internal ambassadors, and sometimes you're coming in fresh. I think of this one story teaching inside where it was a men's class. There's probably 15 men coming in, and one gentleman in particular, like very big, just big human being. And he came in talking about being in the SHU, solitary housing unit, being in the hole in Pelican Bay. And he needed me to know that he was tough and he was no joke. But he was there. I mean, there, in barring very few circumstances, there's some programs where like there's a mandate, but like you have also chosen to come into this classroom, and maybe you're there because you just need a change of view for 2-3 hours. That's fine. We know we're going to get you at some point. So whatever brought you in there. And I'm just registering this gentleman, and he's, coming in, and then I start teaching the class and do my introduction, and pretty quickly, these two gentlemen sitting there, one starts speaking Spanish to the other and saying, more or less, I don't quite understand what she's saying. She's speaking a little too fast for me. I'm not sure I can save the class.
You speak Spanish, by the way, don't you?
I do.
Okay.
I was actually born in Spain. My mother was a foreign language teacher. I was very lucky to live in an environment where we were instructed. I had a type 3 mom who was like, you will learn all the other languages and not be those Americans who think that America is the only country in the world. And so all my friends were listening to like pop music. I was listening to, the news in French. Anyway, so I paused the class and I turned my attention to this gentleman, and I say in Spanish, I'm very sorry. Yes, unfortunately, right now we only have English programming. We're working on translated materials like one day. If your buddy's willing to help you out, you're welcome to stay. But like, I get it, and I'm not going to be able to translate live and blah, blah, blah. And this other guy who's sitting right next to me goes, damn, I thought you were just a white woman. And I was like, oh my God. So I looked at him and I said, I am a white woman. And I'm also a whole lot more. And I'm trusting, and I can't wait to find out who you all are and what more there is to know about you. And the big guy kind of came in just like rough and tumble. He just sort of relaxed a little bit. And then sure enough, he was like the greatest champion by the end of that class. And it's just each class has its own little funny start and anecdote, but
why can't you teach in Spanish? I mean, if you're fluent in the language, I mean, maybe the materials are still in English or whatever, but what's keeping you from just doing like a Spanish class?
It's a really good question. I would need to brush up on my personal development Spanish. It's a different vocabulary.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, I think that's something that we're looking at, because certainly here in California and other states, many other populous states with significant incarcerated populations, there's certainly needs. So Texas, New York, Florida, I mean, now it's more than ever, right? Like that's such a growing part of our overall population. And unfortunately, no surprise, a growing part of our incarcerated population too. So that'll be in another episode.
Yeah, we can do it. We'll do a whole episode in Spanish.
There you go. Muy bien.
You said muy bien. All right. Entonces, no, I can't. I don't know enough Spanish to move on. But all right. So you said you said a sentence earlier as though it was just a normal thing to say. And I think if somebody's never been locked up or know anybody who has, they would have thought that this was madness. But you were talking about walking, and I want you to explain why it's not madness. You're talking about walking through the yard and being, a woman on a male prison yard, and in describing all that, you said that you feel safer there than if you were out in the free world walking down Fillmore Street. And I think it's a good chance to just detail exactly what it's like on the inside to explain that, because it sounds crazy to say it that way, but it's absolutely true. And I want to know why.
Yeah, I mean, look, some piece of it is that there are a number of corrections officers who have eyes on, here, there, and everywhere. So that's part of it. But I think more than that is, in my experience, which is not insignificant, but also limited. I've only been in 3 institutions, and they're all institutions who have agreed to have us come in and program there. So you got to kind of see like the self-fulfilling piece here, and what kind of program officer, corrections officer are willing to support this work, which is amazing. And I also think there is this piece that I've experienced many, many, many times of just this mix of gratitude and a bit of sort of shock, awe, surprise. And I've heard a version of the sentence many times: you could be anywhere. Why are you here? So I have experienced, it's just beautiful, actually, Clay. It's like that moment of human connection of, why are you here? It's like, well, I'm actually here for you. And I'm also here for me, in the sense that when I'm inviting you to do this work, I have to do my own damn work too, because there's no way I can ask you to show up if I'm not showing up. I mean, I often describe my time when I'm a guide inside as, I'm not a religious person, but to me, it's like a sort of church, because I need to be present. I need to be accountable. I need to show up. And I don't care where you are. If you've got 2 or more people efforting in that direction, it's magical. So I think a lot of the safety piece is around the fact that, the men and women who are unfortunately on the inside are really grateful when someone decides to spend any amount of their time in support, in concern, in love for their welfare.
So the first classes that you taught, you go in and teach on your own, right? Or do you usually go in tandem with another person?
It's really wonderful, because now, as our guide population is growing, we have instituted co-guiding.
Yeah.
But in the beginning, part of the second group, and it was, I think, 8 or 9 of us, and I was really only the only person there that was already in the Bay Area, where we already had institutions, available in programming. Minnesota was the other place that we were at, and Suzanne and Phil, were with me in that course, and they went off to Shakopee Prison there. But pretty quickly, I was doing an apprenticeship with Susan. She and I were co-guiding, she was guiding. I was soaking up every ounce of Susan that I could in San Mateo, doing my apprenticeship, just, that. And then this is not an uncommon thing as well, being like, what? Like, how am I going to do this in her way? And then recognizing, and she's so gracious with this, of creating space for, this is how I do this curriculum, and you got to find your voice in your way. And certainly, having come out of the guide training program this summer with some 50 odd guides who are now, starting to apprentice, it's just so true and amazing that this work can come to life in so many different personalities and types. But pretty quickly, I think I was just finishing up my apprenticeship, and And Susan said, so are you like, you're ready to go in, you know? And so I got like trial by fire. And then we have this beautiful guidebook right now. Beautiful, gorgeous, stunning. Robin Grant, massive shout out. Suzanne, oh my God, all the work and just amazing. I have zero to do with any of that. Just the happy beneficiary. And so I was off at Elmwood, which is a correctional facility. Correctional. It's an institution in Santa Clara County.
Yeah. And
I was going to teach the women's side. Dana Vitorelo, one of our amazing core seasoned primary guides, was gracious enough to meet me there and kind of help orient me. And immediately there's like the CEO's like, she's not on the list or she's not supposed to be on this, you know? Yeah. And one of our core values is flexibility. And I think that's when the hashtag flexibility was coined because, so I finally figure out where I am, asking people, hey, I think I'm supposed to be teaching. There's M this and M that and M3 and M5. But I find my way into the room and realize that I'm teaching 2 classes back to back, both protective custody. And for our listeners who may not know what that is, like these are those who are not in GP or general population for a variety of reasons. It might be the nature of their crime. It might be because they are so-called snitches and need protection, or, you know, lots of reasons. Yeah. But the second class was a group of women who were all affiliated with the Norteñas gang, which is a gang sort of originated out of Mexico. And, you know, you hear the word gang and all this, and they were just family, right? Like the tias were raising her kids and they all grew up together. But I had the guidebook was basically 8 pages, you know, a single sheet for every module that we were teaching. We have an 8 module course that we teach from. And I remember calling Sue Lambert, who's an ambassador, a guide. She's a New Ventures West coach. She and I run the coaching program at EPP together. She's amazing. And I called her and I was kind of freaking out. Like, how am I going to do this? I'm just an apprentice. Oh my, Sue, help. What do I do?
You were going in by yourself, right?
Going in by myself. And I'd never been to that institution before. Like I'd never been there at all. And each one of them they're all radically different, right? Radically different. And she said, listen, 95% of this, or whatever it was, 95%, she goes, is just that you're there and you're present. And you'll figure it out and you'll go through the, you know, then bullet points of our guide packet. And she was so right. And I learned a ton cutting my teeth solo. I mean, the lockdowns and the CEOs who were pro and who were anti, and the women and the nature of where they were coming from and where they were trying to get to. And I was intense. I came home wiped out every Wednesday, but yeah, it was a intense and amazing experience. And I kept coming back. Yeah.
You survived it and then went back for more. So you talk about COs. I've actually never even thought about this. COs, which is the correctional officers, the jailers, the people who work on the inside there. And some are pro and some are anti. And I don't think I've ever thought about this before, but I mean, I guess some of the guards there are just not in favor of what we're doing. I mean, I don't even know. Is that true? Is that what you mean by anti and pro?
Yeah, it's true. I mean, there's a wide range, right? Like nothing, as we're learning in 2021, nothing is binary and nothing is absolute. And the law of 3 tells us that many times over.
Right.
But sometimes it's, you know, it's a pain for me to have to move, you know, our residents from this place to that place. It's a security risk. We've got some new people coming in who are, you know, maybe detoxing and in the state. I had this one situation where there was, I mean, Elmwood in particular, largely because of staffing issues at times would have sometimes lockdowns and, you know, it just would be tricky because you'd sort of be teaching a class and then it would pause and it would stop. And the CEOs could really work with you to try to keep the class moving and going. And other times, I'm sort of hesitant to say anything because I've never been in their position dealing with the population from their perspective. And again, remembering that they're often understaffed and trying to manage a whole lot. But sometimes it was tricky, but that was less often my experience. Most often it was interesting, Clay. I started to see that the ones who saw us coming in and doing the work, there was actually fewer issues in the dorm. or in the pod, whatever the language was per institution. They saw the women or the men or what have you when we were teaching behave better because they were doing this work together. I had one class where it absolutely erupted in massive reactivity, where it finally, I was like, ladies, come on, hey students, let's go, like clapping. And finally I had sort of almost about get up on my chair and shout to get everyone to settle down. And there was just a lot going down. And I sort of looked around the room like, hey, do you see what the type 7s are doing, the type 8s and the type 9s? And can we forget the book, forget the curriculum? Can we just see live what we're up to? And we sort of, everyone kind of settled down enough for us to continue to do this work and have this conversation. And I said to one woman who happened to be a type 8, I said, okay, if you bring this back to the dorm, what's going to happen? And she said, well, I'll probably be put in solitary. I'll be written up. I said, okay, so do you see that you have a choice here?
Yeah.
And she was like, well, and I said, it's up to you. Like she's a type 8, right? Type 8, 9s and 1s love that agency and that sovereignty. And I said, or you could take some deep breaths and we could try to calm down here and not bring it into the dorms. And when they came back the next week, they had shared that they were able to pull it together. And that a week or two later, the CEO had mentioned, like, I'm seeing the difference in this group. Like they're calmer. It's just smoother. Things are easier. So they started to really turn around and see that the work was benefiting everyone, including their ability to do their jobs.
A quick pause just to check on time. Are we still good? Are you getting close to needing to wrap it up?
I'm good.
10 minutes or so?
I'm good. Yeah, I don't have to be a mom for a minute. So
okay, cool.
And I'm having way too much fun talking to you, Clay. We never get to talk often enough. And when we do, it's always a pleasure.
It's rare. I mean, I'm reachable. I'm always here. I'm not always traveling around and being busy, but
right back at you, friend.
Yeah, true. Fair enough. Touche.
Right back at you.
So,
well, we're rejection types, so we all have our vibe.
Yeah. Well, it's not my fault. It's everybody else's, right? For sure. It's not me at all. Yeah. So have you ever had, you mentioned Dana. I actually talked to her earlier today and she was sharing, nice. She was, or F-bomb Dana, as sometimes we call her. And she had shared a story, and I won't repeat it. It'll be on the episode, but you may have already heard about it before, where things, what's the nice way to say this, didn't go as well as it could have, where she, it was a learning experience for her and how she handled a moment in one of her panels. And, I wouldn't have thought to go there or to ask her about that because it just kind of naturally came up. But now that I've had that conversation with her and talking with you, another guide, I'm curious, have you ever had an experience where after the fact it was like, well, I fucked that up and wish I could have that one over? Or has it been mostly like smooth sailing?
Oh God, no. To be human is to err. So there's definitely moments, it's like, this is where our type comes in, right? Because when we're not present, that type stuff just ready, available, oodles of it pouring out whenever you need it. And so I think for me, it's hard. I'm trying to think of a specific one. I mean, there's been moments for sure, like more than I'd probably like to admit, where I've wanted to kind of overextend myself and like overconnect with someone and actually, it's interesting. Now that you were talking about Dana, the one that just pops into my mind right now is when I've been in San Quentin. The first time we'd done some dyad, some pairing up work, and I got paired with one of the students, and there was a time where I was subbing and came in and taught with Dana, and this person was coming up for parole, and I was fully connecting with him and talking with him and taking up time and energy speaking with him about that experience, and we were really connecting, and it all felt good and lovely because my type 2 stuff was just getting, super jazzed about that kind of, we're just in this and best friends and connecting. It's amazing and love, love, love. And rightfully so. The next time Dana and I met up and we were teaching somewhere else, I can't remember, or she was coming out of a class, I was coming in. She said, well, I need to talk to you about something. And she, pointed out that I had not only sort of jeopardized myself or the program, but also the student because of overfamiliarity is a reason where someone can get moved like that and get kicked out of programs and get moved out of prisons. And can happen in an instant, and it can just take somebody else saying, oh yeah, I saw the two of them getting all cozy, and it can be totally innocuous, but doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It just doesn't matter. Right. So I think that's sort of a good example, particularly it's a type 2. And luckily, doing the work that we are asked to do, that we all hopefully get to do and need to do, is being able to receive Dana's, comeuppance.
Yeah.
Because she, being a type 6, was very direct. But it was like, I sort of licked my wounds for a day or two. And then I was like, actually, I really appreciated that she was able to bring that to my attention. Yeah.
It's kind of a bummer that you have to know that, as that you have to keep that at the forefront of your mind, as not just as a guide, but just as anybody going on the inside. I mean, even me as an ambassador, somebody who's been locked up, I gotta do the same thing and make sure that you follow the rules, because they're definitely there, and they do not give a shit if it's an accident or not. So you
intention doesn't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't at all. And you have to, it's a weird thing to care. I mean, imagine being a doctor in a hospital, and you're caring for people, and you're healing them, doing the doctor thing and all that, blah, blah, blah. And imagine being told, by the way, you're not allowed to care for these people emotionally. You can only do only do your intellectual work, only do your doctor thing, but don't get emotionally attached to anything. That wouldn't work.
No. Although I think some doctors still try to do that, but they're not the ones that are as successful. But no, it's a really good point, because one of the EPP lines is like, I'm sorry, but you're going to fall in love with your students, and you do. And can you have that sense of connection with them without, while also holding and maintaining boundaries that are really put in place to keep everybody safe? And that's one of the beautiful things about being able to work in our Reconnecting program, which is our weekly support program for our formerly incarcerated students. And look, if you may have done just one class, or maybe you've taken it 10 times, or you're a spouse or special someone or parent or child of someone who's been incarcerated, it's just this weekly time where we get to continue to do our work together. And it's really lovely to be able to then have a different kind of relationship when some of our students become free people. And it's such a gift, even this summer when I got to see you at our wonderful potluck, seeing some of our students that I had never been able to do more than extend a fist bump to on the inside, to be able to give them a big hug and just stand in their presence in the free world was really special.
People, when they ask, like, what's the biggest takeaway from prison, and of all the things that I learned, of all the things that I know from that experience, and all the things that I appreciate about the experience, the simplest thing of all is that I just learned the value of a hug. And when you talk about being, fist bumping people in prison, and that's just the rules, man. It just is what it is, and they don't give a shit. And it's honestly, it's cool. At least they let us do that. Like there are some units where you can't even have any kind of physical contact, whether it's a fist bump or a pat on the back or anything. But then, then come the picnics on the outside, and all rules are not out here with us, because we're in the free world. I want to know what it's like, and you kind of alluded to this about seeing people at the picnic and stuff, but as a guide, as someone who goes in and teaches this and does the work with the guys on the inside and the girls on the inside and all that, how does it feel when you see someone get out and they keep their head on straight, and they move forward in a direction of progress, and they're succeeding out here in life, and they're actually getting it done, and their background, what they came through, where they were, because you met them in prison, but they're out here doing things and getting it done in the real world. What's that feel like as a guide?
Yeah, I really love that question, but I'm going to expand it a little bit and keep it as simple as, what's it like to just reconnect with someone in the free world? Because the reality is that some of our students do come out and they are more than ready, and they have this amazing support network, and they come to Reconnecting, and they just have a system in place that maybe was there before, and enough of a system that they can start to build a foundation and go from there. And then there's some students who I, love just as much on the inside, and they come out and maybe they've come to 2 reconnecting meetings 12 months apart. And it's sort of like I feel the same about all of them, which is any evidence of them demonstrating that they know they belong in our community makes me feel so happy. It touches me. It moves me. And in fact, sometimes, the ones who are just on the edge and sort of dance around and pop in and scurry away and pop in again, when they pop back in, it's like, yes, that no matter you fell off the wagon, maybe you actually got reincarcerated, whatever it might be, like you're not crushing it, but you still know that you are welcome in our community. You belong. So it's all wonderful, and I'm really grateful for the chance to meet people where they're at and just hold space for them. And some people go from A to B, others go A to Z. We all have a different starting point, ending point, but I'm just really proud. Not sure, that's sort of just like delighted and honored that I'm part of an organization that it's really come as you are. Come as you are.
This was kind of short notice. We talked about it briefly a while back, and then maybe it literally yesterday or this week I texted you and like, hey, can we do that again? Because I got deadlines. And so this was really short notice. So thank you. Thank you for making time and downloading a new app and making a new account to chat with me and all the technical stuff that goes with that. I enjoyed it on a personal level. I love talking with you. You're my friend, and I enjoyed it. Any parting thoughts to share with the listening public?
Well, Clay, you are my friend too, and I am so glad you were my radioactive spider. And I guess a parting thought is my older son, who's just headed back to school, was saying he wished he could take classes about the future because so many of them are about the past. And I gave him the old, those who don't know history are doomed to repeat it. But we talked a lot about shock points. We talked a lot about you can know the past, you can prepare for the future, but then all of a sudden someone enters stage left or stage right and your life changes. And my parting thought is, one, you're doing an awesome job with this podcast. Really grateful that you're lending your voice and your mind and your heart to this effort to amplify the work we're doing. 2, it is so much fun to hang with you, man. I miss you. And 3 is thank you so much for being my shock point and bringing me to this community. I am forever grateful, as are all the people in my life, because me doing this work has only benefited the relationships all across my world. So thank you.
And thank you. For more information about EPP, please visit EnneagramPrisonProject.org. We appreciate your time and attention today. Stay tuned for future episodes, which you can expect on the 12th of every month as we continue to tell the story of Enneagram Prison Project.